went back and like I've had quite a few people that I've trained, that I've taught, that I've mentored, that I've helped succeed professionally and personally. And I think if you went back and asked all of them, 90% of them, you'd hear a similar message. So I think I have a brand. I think my challenge is firm it up. And because I think it's constant polishing as well, right? You can always get better.
Yes,
You can always you can always turn up the volume on it more. You can always say that piece of it doesn't serve me anymore, so I'm going to drop that piece.
Mm-hmm.
And this happens through experience and discovery and success and failure, right? But I think that one of the exercises I did, it's interesting. This fits right in because I didn't see it coming. A while back, I called up like 10 people that knew me really well. Some of them used to work for me. Some of them I used to work with. Some of them were personal friends. And I said, I want to ask a favor of you. Can you, in an email, in just a couple of sentences, because I want to have it captured, because I want to catalog it and put it to work. What do you think my superpower is? And I can't remember why I did it. I think I heard somebody suggest it and I thought, wow, that sounds cool. That sounds valuable. And the consistency of the response was how I communicate. But the words, the adjectives that accompanied that were like humble, articulate, candid, kind, funny, intelligent, thoughtful. There were a couple authentic. And some people used 2 or 3 of those. Some people used one of those, and a couple people used almost all of them, either by inference or the actual word itself. And I thought to myself, from a branding standpoint, this is my brand. I just have to figure out how to distill it down into a more consumable thought or phrase. And I had a guy the other day who he's a British guy, and he's into candor, man. He's into authenticity, like way more so than the vast majority of people online. And he teaches branding, and I like his style because he says fuck it all the time. I think FU is part of his brand. And he said very simply, if you're looking to get your brand going, think of a phrase, start using it, and keep using it.
Interesting.
Right? Yeah.
Because people develop a relationship with that that phrase, but also that person. They can identify with them, but the consistency is an important part of that. So interesting.
And I wrote right underneath that, for just because it came to me, simple, difficult, and worthwhile. And I think that's.
But how do you brand that? I mean, do you call yourself?
I don't know that you do. I don't know that you do. It's not enough. It's just a thought that I wanted to capture because I like simple.
Yeah.
I don't expect things to be easy, and I seek things that are worthwhile. And you can dig deeper into all 3 of those words. But I think this branding exercise, because I've heard people that have massive brands talk. I mean, everybody's heard Steve Jobs talk about branding, right? Mm-hmm. And it's a constant process, I think, Jim. I don't think one day you're like, oh, I got my brand and I'm done, because that presumes that nothing will change moving forward. Mm-hmm. I mean, look at the pivots that Apple's done over the years. They even fired Steve Jobs at one point. Mm-hmm. Then they got into the phone business. So I think branding is
but that's totally different. That's a company. We're talking about personal brands right now, not company brands. And I think there's a big difference between a brand like Apple than there is, Mark's brand or my brand, Jim's brand.
It's different. Yeah, it's different, but there are similarities because branding is branding. I think you might have to look at it a little differently. You might have to consider a myriad of things with a company like Apple, whereas maybe Mark or Jim doesn't have to consider all those different variables. But I think you're still trying to do the same thing. Are you known as a particular thing? Are you known for a particular thing? Are you known to be really good at a particular thing? I think those are all components of your brand. Yeah. I love the word authenticity. I think it implies quite a bit of good stuff. But
do you call yourself that, or are you that, and then people discover that you can't say, hey, I'm authentic and, listen to me or follow my
no,
podcast or brand. So
ironically, to claim to be authentic, it actually means you're not authentic.
Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, which again is the subject. And I also think it's particularly difficult later on because one, you don't care as much. You care enough to want to have the conversation and be relevant. Everybody does, but you don't care as much as you used to when you're 20 or 30 or maybe even 40, right? So there's also that side of it as well. We're not as maybe as we just care less. I think this is part of the aging process too, right? You get beat up a little bit in life, and you start to let some things go that maybe were more important in earlier phases of your life.
Yeah. I think it also depends on what you're trying to accomplish, what your goals are. I think that, I was looking at this book that I shared with you, The $1 Trillion Coach, last time we talked.
Mm-hmm.
This guy, Bill Campbell, he apparently impacted the lives of almost every tech success in Silicon Valley over the course of 20 years. No one's ever heard of him because he didn't want to be heard of. He didn't want he didn't want to be a brand. He just wanted to do good and not be shouting out to the world that he was good. He just wanted to help other people do better. And so he's not trying to accomplish anything other than doing good work. So branding is irrelevant to him, but I think that's unique.
Yeah.
And I also think, Jim, that you alluded to it earlier. I mean, is this an exercise of ego? Is it bragging? Is it like, who the fuck do you think you are? Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah. And you could throw narcissism in there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, you could.
There's a form of that, which I think is normal.
Yeah. I also think that as we're talking, it seems to me that, to your point, a company brand, that's kind of it's not a human being, it's an entity, right? So there's no ego with an entity, right? You're doing things in pursuit of creating a particular image for an entity, right? When you turn that internally, I think if you do it from an ego standpoint, it's wrong. But if you do it from a self-awareness standpoint, then it might be a healthy exercise.
Yeah. It just came to mind. Maybe where I'm struggling a little bit is there's the brand in my life, or my small world of is related to a product or a service or some kind of an enterprise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe what I'm working through this to where we are together is it's just your online profile in relationship to your personal brand and then your professional brand. And when are they one of the same, or and what's the difference? I don't have a online profile for intentionally, but I also think that that's something I need to really reevaluate and become more engaged and more online going forward if I want to promote anything I do, whether it's a business or a product or whatever it is. And I'm struggling with that. I have to say, I'm just being transparent about it, because I grew up in a family that was not, you weren't encouraged to toot your own horn.
I think that's cool. I think that's generational, dude. Cause I remember my father in particular, but my mother too. We didn't do a lot of celebrating of achievement. And my father was adamantly against us sharing with anybody what he did for a living. It was like, you tell him I work in a sewer,
Yeah.
It's like, he was not a gloating, but I think that's generational. I think with social media now and online celebrity, and what do they call people that have a large following online? What do they call them? Influencers.
Yeah.
I think that what we're trying to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, is we're trying to get all of our wisdom from the perspective of two middle-aged men who are relatively conservative, both enjoyed playing sports most of our lives. We're fathers. You're a husband. I was a husband. And our worldview, I think, could be called practical. Things need to make sense. So, but I don't think we'll ever get to a point where I can say Jim, your brand is this. I think the goal is, at least in my mind, if you go talk to someone about me, you look at my LinkedIn profile, you go to my website, you watch a video, you listen to some audio, or read one of my articles or posts, you're going to go, that guy's consistent. I know exactly who he is, and I know exactly where he's coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the best I can do. I think I have that now, with more lately than 15 years ago. But you and I are just kind of coming into this. What do I want to do with this idea that I think I might need to consider in every move I make online? Am I being authentic? Am I being consistent? Am I pushing the narrative that I want to be pushing? And you self-police with those things in mind, I think you're fine.
Yeah, fine. Again, you have to define what the goal is. What's the objective? If the goal is to help others, can you help them by just creating free content? Do you eventually have to, have some kind of an offer or some kind of a structure or program? I was listening to a talk this morning, and it was interesting, but I don't even get into specifics. But the guy that was being interviewed says, I do a $1,000 cup of coffee. That's how he operates. If I'm going to engage, if somebody's going to engage as me, or I'm going to do anything, it's $1,000 cup of coffee. That may be an hour, that may be 2 hours, but it's a cup of coffee and $1,000. You pay me $1,000. I'll sit down and have a cup of coffee with you. When we're done, I'll give you a 1-pager of what I think of your business idea or potential partnerships and so on. And then that may lead into another opportunity or another session, which is like $25,000. Right.
Yep.
And at first it was like, wow, that's a lot. But he's saying people value information they pay for.
Yes.
And the $1,000 is not just because to make $1,000, it's to qualify them. And I know that if they pay me $1,000 for a cup of coffee, the chances of them implementing that information is about 100% greater than if I gave them a free cup of coffee.
I completely agree with that. That's a cool method.
And it's not mine, by the way.
I know. You gave him credit. You didn't remember his name, but you gave him credit, or you didn't want to mention his name. But I think I just was bumped into that notion yesterday. I was I'm trying to get on podcasts as a guest to contribute to what we're doing and what I'm doing. And it's all, to me, it's all the same thing. It's the only thing we'll have to figure out is, who's going to be responsible for what, and how the revenue is shared. And in the absence of any variances, it would just be split, but less who pays for what. But this woman, she went through a significant qualification process. I had to fill out a form. It wasn't a difficult form. And the first thing we do is we set up a 15-minute call. So I vet her, but she vets me, right? Because she doesn't want any meatheads on her podcast, right? And she doesn't know me from Adam. So I think that's a valuable process for her to have in place. So I went on her website and I looked at it, and part of what she does is career coaching, and her packages are, I think 1,000 to 2,500. But at the bottom, there's like, if you just want a free half-hour session, it's $97. And it's like, well, $97 now becomes something most people can pay.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also more than nothing. So when I lead with a 30-minute phone call, and it's free. And I think I'm going to stop doing that, because not only
I like where this conversation is going. Let's have that conversation. The $1,000 cup of coffee, like you said, whether it's $97 or $1,000, it's the courage to ask for it, knowing that you're going to lose some opportunities. His point was, listen, I'm in a position professionally and in life. It's okay to lose them. They need to self-qualify. That's the way of self-qualifying them. And that, it's a cup of coffee, whether it's $1,000 or $97, it's just whether, you or I are willing to do that. And can we create enough perceived value for them to take that time of money and time?
Hey, I've listened to the last, because I'm doing the editing. That's not much editing. As you know, I snip off the beginning and I snip off the end. And if we break in the middle of it, I can snip that and piece it back together. So it's not but it allows me to listen. Mm-hmm. And when you listen to what we talk about, you get a completely different experience than you get when you are talking about it. Right.
Interesting.
Well, it's as if you are stepping outside of your own body. And now you're a spectator to a conversation by two other people. And then you wrestle with the idea that you're one of those people throughout the listening process, which is interesting as well. But I would tell you that if you listen, if you are an aspirational person, because some people aren't, if you have aspirations and you're intellectually curious and you listen to 2 of our episodes, you would be interested in seeing what we would provide for services.
Because I think
there's a lot of wisdom. We have to
put that out to find out if it's true. We have to. But I appreciate that. And again, that's a good sign that there's another rule that is, I think the same podcast or a different one, about how you never listen to your own content. But I agree with you. I think in order to value your own information, it's probably good to listen to your content. It makes you improve on it, makes you refine it. And it sounds like when you did that, that was helpful, to see the value that you're providing.
It gives me insight into who you are.
Yep.
I can sit here and say, I think I know you very well, but we've known each other for a few years.
Yep.
And not 25. We didn't grow up together. I'm sure there's a lot about you that I don't know.
Yeah.
So it gives me
a lot you don't want to know.
Right back at you, brother. Yeah. Right back at you. No, but I think, from a branding standpoint, I think that part of your brand is what you're worth, right?
What you're worth, your self-worth. What do you mean worth? Yeah, just stay with that for a minute.
Your self-worth is certainly part of that, but more importantly, to this guy, the $1,000 cup of coffee or the $97 hour or the $5,000 weekend, whatever it is, I think one of the biggest things I struggle with, and it seems to be something that everyone struggles with when they make the transition from brick and mortar to online, where messaging just becomes so much more important, is who the fuck am I to be telling people I can change their lives?
Yeah.
But I have a track record of changing the lives of thousands of people, and so do you.
Yeah, you're right. But we don't put as much value on it probably as others do. And this is why, and this is actually a great segue into 2 things. And then I want you to run with this one. But I still feel very strongly about, because our framework, right? The 5 areas of life, and starts with yourself, your self-worth, your self-evaluation, so on and so on. But I think in the end, everybody needs an agent, and an agent is the one that looks at you you can't look at yourself. This looks at you and says, what is your value to the market? And that to me is a service that I would absolutely like to bring to life, whether you and I do it together, partly you the career part and this and that. But I think that ultimately is the end game here. Somebody asked me about the podcast, and I said, well, why are you doing a podcast? I said, well, right now we're doing it because we enjoy it. But I think ultimately we want to help others be the best they can be, which I'm setting you up for that post that you put on LinkedIn yesterday about the Wall Street Journal article. I want you to talk a little bit about that and run with that, because it's very relevant to what we're talking about, right? And that's this it's kind of not about self-help, but midlife. There's a huge market out there just on the sheer numbers, and a very, very, let's say, capable market of paying for these kind of services. But what did that article, what was your takeaway? And I'll let you describe the headline and what it was.
Yeah, I don't remember the headline, but I know that it was focusing on the market for coaches and mentors in the midlife transition space, where people are bumping into hardship and they're getting confused and they're getting anxious and they're getting fearful. And there's this burgeoning industry of people, specifically, not just life coaching, not just professional coaching, not just leadership, whatever, branding, whatever it is, but specifically to those people that are in midlife, going through what is normally described as a crisis of some kind. And they feel they're left without the right tools or answers to questions or direction or advice or all of the above. And I think it did two things for me. One was, that's nice to get affirmation that what we're working towards is in high demand. And then it was, yeah, but what about all the other people that need this help? And I struggle with that, I struggle with that, because then you got this body of younger people that are lost, or they're not working, or they don't have the same work. It's like, I don't, it confused me a little bit, but it also was affirming for me. And that's why I posted.
I saw it a little bit differently, and that it wasn't necessarily by it being in a crisis. It's just that there's this market of people in their, what it said, right, 40s, 50s, 60s that have a lot of life left in them, and they have money and they have desire to live those lives, those years out in a very productive way. And there's a whole new industry being created. We're part of that right now, but I think we're early on that. And I'll just share, I think I mentioned to you, was it last weekend, my wife hosted a women's retreat. So I think it was probably 20 women, and I don't know what they charged, it's $300 or $400 each, all day event. And they came, they had breakfast with real good food, and they had yoga and they breathing and all kinds of, it was the whole day, right? 9 o'clock to 6:30 or something. They loved it, right? It was all women. And that's an example of those kind of either businesses or groups being created.
Yeah, I think
that are specific to that age group, because these women were, 50 probably to 60-ish,
Yeah, I'd love to know more about the structure of that and how it was organized and how it was marketed. And it sounds like a word of mouth thing. I know she was pretty well connected at high levels with a lot of women.
Well, it was connected through a dance instructor that does, and she's pretty well known. It's got a pretty good following. They did something like this down in San Diego. So there was that list plus my wife's friends and so on. She reached out to just good friends and close friends. Really nice. It was a nice day. And I think there'll be more of those kind of things.
I think community and connectivity are more important now than ever. I think because of COVID, I think because of social media, I think just because of, there seem to be a lot of people at all ages, but particularly at our age, that are kind of bumping up against this reality that is like, I don't think this is not purposeful work. This is routine. This is grind. This is cog in a wheel stuff. And I'm getting to a point now where I got fewer years ahead of me than I have behind me. And I'm starting to notice that, or I'm at that point where I got just as much in front of me as I do behind me. So that, in that regard, I got a whole life ahead of me. Right. So I have more appreciation for the time that's elapsing, which means I have more of a feeling of obligation to make that time worthwhile. And in worthwhile, I always come back to, how can I help other people? And I know that you do too. You know?
Yeah. This one, they had a special doctor speak. I think she's from Stanford or something, talking about, women aging periods and all those different kind of women stuff. But yeah, they want to know, they want content, they want material that's specific to their time period, their life.
Yes. I think empathy
I don't think there was any career stuff on this one at all. This was just all about, it was wellness. That's what it was. It was physical and mental wellness.
Well, I two other things that are, and it's a branding topic, so it's not removed from what we're talking about. Two things that have happened recently. One is I've been talking about the hiring process being broken. Right, for a long time, like my whole career. Like, it's been broken since I started in 1987, and I'm in the middle of it with big companies, little companies.
Well, you've obviously been successful. You've monetized that, and it's paid you well. So as broken as it is, it still is a business.
It is, but there's so many inefficiencies. And then my point is, from a branding standpoint, is I was thinking to myself, I started to think about this because I'm writing about it and I'm talking about it, is that if you are in an organization and you have a frustrating hiring process, inefficient, broken, call it whatever you want, and you wanted somebody to come in and fix it, I'm perfect for that.
Mhm.
I could do that in a day. I
Mhm.
couldn't do all the work in a day, but I could do the assessment in a day. If you
Mhm.
gave me access to the right stakeholders, maybe 5 people into
Mhm.
department heads, the
Yep.
HR person, and somebody, maybe the CEO, to talk about what the vision is. What are you trying to accomplish with the organization? Because what you'll find is the vision of the organizations, when you trickle down to how they hire people, they're completely incongruent,
Mhm.
almost at every company I've ever dealt with in my life.
Right.
And people seem to be satisfied with that. And then I had another kid call me up who talked to me about 3 years ago. I think his father is a friend of my brother's, and he was looking for some help. And I helped him. And I didn't charge him anything because he was family, friend and family discount, if you will.
Yeah.
And I thought, maybe he'll call me in a few years. I told him to keep in touch. Well,
Yeah.
he called me a couple of weeks ago and he said, my buddy and I guess I shouldn't be terribly specific. My buddy and I are in a very specific scientific industry, and it's booming. And we're in this particular city where it's even booming more. And what we found is the recruiters in this space don't know anything about science.
Mhm.
So the people that are doing the hiring are having to wade through resumes of unqualified people because no one's in the middle of that saying, wait a second, that's not the science we're doing. This is, you don't know anything about this. Well, these guys have both been candidates being represented by recruiters too.
Hmm.
So they've worked in companies where the hiring process
So what do
is
they want to do? They
frustrating.
want to start
Start a
agency?
recruiting company. Yeah. So
Interesting.
I'm on retainer with them now. We
That's
got a
cool.
call this afternoon.
Yeah.
And it's really fun. So, I mean, but it's also like, well, that's different than that. That's different than that. And I was coming back around to the agent comment. And it seems to me that anyone that I'm familiar with through study or research or introduction, that I've seen their career arc and they've achieved great success financially as well as quality of life. There was an agent in there at some point, and what the agent did was get them over the hump, right?
Yeah.
Broke them through whatever was their limiting beliefs or limiting factors or whatever. And then the agent stays part of their life, but doesn't really function as an agent much anymore. What these guys do then, and gals do, is they get into these mastermind groups where they're hanging around with other people that are equally as successful and sharing and learning, and everybody throws 25 grand in the pot and they rent an island for the weekend. So it's a form of agency, but it's different. It takes on a different shape because they're not getting traded to another team. They're making progress.
Yeah. So just again, run with that. That's really what you do. If you think about it, you are an agent. You're an agent to represent. If somebody's looking for the job, you're dressing them up, right? You're branding them to some degree so they can go receive a job offer that pays the maximum amount that they can get. That's a form of an agent.
Yeah, you're polishing them up. To your point, it's like there's probably going to be some work done on a resume. Although I don't like the resume as a tool to finding work. It's a necessary evil in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Your LinkedIn profile is going to be completely relevant. We're going to have to polish that thing up, right?
Yeah. And
then we're going to have to recalibrate more often than not, almost all the time. I find what do you want to do? Where is your purpose?
Mm-hmm.
And even if you don't know, it's time to start thinking about that now. Look into your heart, look into your mind, talk to your friends, talk to your dad and mom, whoever you want to bounce this off of. Like my question to my colleagues, what do you think my superpower is?
Yeah.
Well, I'm in the right space for my superpower if communication's my deal, because coupled with a lot of wisdom, and then once you find out what you want to do, you have some direction in, this industry or that type of work or whatever. Now you have to tell a story. Right. Yeah. And most people can't tell their stories.
It's funny how now I've answered my own question. I said, what is personal brand? That's when somebody comes to you looking for a job. That's what you're doing. You're creating their new brand. You're helping them rebrand themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not official. Maybe it's not on their social media channels, but you are helping them at a rebrand at that stage in their career.
Yeah. It's
think
funny.
about that. That's what it really is. That's what you're doing.
No, it is. It is.
And maybe what I'm suggesting is you could even take that further and make that part of your personal brand, which then of course is related to your professional brand. And then how you push that out through either social media channels or content that you create that's consistent with your brand. So
yeah,
it's funny how we went full circle on this one, but yeah,
I think it's it reminds me of the guy that called me up and asked me if I offered leadership training. And I thought to myself, yeah, I do. I just never called it that, Yeah. And that's what you're doing. You're calling me an agent. It's like, yeah, yes, I am. You're right. I just never called it that,
Yeah. So if I was to be your agent, I'd probably rebrand it in this way, because like you said, we've had enough conversations. You just do this. This is innate. This is just what you do naturally. The first thing when somebody's looking for a job, you got to get their head back on, straightened out, because they're a little twisted, because they either lost their job and their egos beat up a little bit, or their confidence is not at the highest point, right? It's probably not a great time.
Yeah. I think of to your point, the sports agent, I think it was Larry Bird, and he talked about it years ago, and it was, I think, Bob Wolf. Remember him? Bob Wolf, big sports agent. He covered, I think he had Magic Johnson as well, and maybe even had Michael Jordan for a period of time, or he could have been a Northeastern guy only. But talking about the value of having Bob negotiating with Red Auerbach so that Larry Bird could maintain his relationship with Red Auerbach, because Larry Bird never asked Red Auerbach for a dime. Bob Wolf did.
Yep.
That's a powerful thing, dude.
Well, it really is.
Yeah.
So he can focus on playing basketball, and
you see what happens when a player and a
business part of
when a player and a coach start to not like each other, it's the end of that. One of them is leaving. And if it's LeBron James, the coach is leaving, and if it's somebody else, then they're leaving. It's just, you see it all the time.
Yeah.
So that's why I would love to have been behind the door with Tom Brady and Bill Belichick when Tom Brady told him he was leaving. Like, why did that happen? Everyone speculates on it.
Yeah.
And it's probably limited to 3 or 4 possibilities, and it's probably some of each. But there's no question in my mind, it was all driven by ego for both of them.
Of course. Yeah. That's what's
so yeah, dude, I think we're bumping up on our scheduled time, but I think that the personal brand discussion is a good discussion. But I don't think, having spoken to you now about it and having thought about it for a while, that it is the same as an entity. And I think we're in agreement on that. I think it's a broader thing, where you've used the same words. Authenticity is part of it. Consistency is part of it. And I think if you're at a point where you could look at any place where someone could find something about you, and you see that messaging is consistent and authentic, I think you've done your personal branding to the extent that you need to. Then it becomes a journey of polishing that as circumstances and environments change moving forward.
Yeah, I think it's good advice. I'm reading a book. I'll report back to you. The author gave it to me. I met him at a function a couple of weeks ago. It's good, but you go through kind of an inventory of your life, and it's some of it's typical, but it's always just a good practice. Your things you're good at, the things you're not, and do like a refresh. So I'm going through that process right now.
Yeah, let me know. I'm always interested in getting book recommendations. I think let's I think, to my point earlier, Jim, I really do think if someone were to listen to 2 of our episodes and they were in the market for an agent, or in the market for change agent, or somebody to help them make some big decisions or take the next big move, that they would seek us out. And I think we need to make ourselves more accessible, and we need to make this messaging get out to more people. So for anybody that's listening, part of what I would ask is, these topics that we're talking about could potentially be very, very helpful for someone that's stuck in, and that could mean a lot of things. So if you do like it, if it does resonate with you, please do comment, share, subscribe, like, whatever mechanisms are available to you, depending on where you're listening to it. But I think we should say that more, Jim. I think we should say that more.
Yeah, we have the framework. We spent a couple of days when I flew back to Florida, like you said, last year before that, we whiteboarded this out. So it's there. I think now we just need to put it up on the site and start talking more about that, referring back to it. It's that's how you know it's good stuff, because when you use it in your everyday conversations, you use it on the podcast, and it still holds, it still stays together.